Hey friends, just in case you weren't going to be able to make the Fib story time tomorrow, because I know sometimes having to do something at a certain time is hard, I wanted to go ahead and record another story for you today. So if you don't make the Fib story time, we still have a book for you. And before we get started, I just want to warn you that my kitten is not in the room today, but my dogs are downstairs. So if you hear barking in the middle of the story, that just means a leaf blew in the yard or somebody walked past the house and the dogs had to let me know about it. All right, are you ready? Get in a good listening position. Our story today is The Curious Garden. Our author today is Peter Brown. I really like how on the title page, the lettering for the word curious is made out of plants. Have you ever seen a plant like that that's shaped into something? Those are called topiaries. And I like how in the word garden, the plants are kind of growing up and over all the letters. Once there was a city without gardens or trees or greenery of any kind. Most people spent their time indoors. As you can imagine, it was a very dreary place. Now, even if you don't know what the word dreary means, if you just look at the picture, do you get an idea of what that word might mean? Do you think it means a happy, colorful, cheerful, wonderful place, or a little bit blah and not so fun to look at, and just nothing pretty or colorful or anything that catches your eye? I think it's the second one. However, there was a boy who loved being outside, even on drizzly days. While everyone stayed inside, you could always find Liam happily splashing through his neighborhood. On one such morning, Liam made several surprising discoveries. He was wandering around the old railway, as he did from time to time, when he stumbled upon a dark stairwell leading up to the tracks. Do you think he should go up it? Well, the railway had stopped working ages ago, and since Liam had always wanted to explore the tracks, there was only one thing for a curious boy to do. Liam ran up the stairs, pushed open the door, and stepped out onto the railway. The first thing he saw was a lonely patch of color. Flowers and plants were the last things he had expected to find up there. But when he took a closer look, it became clear that the plants were dying. They needed a gardener. Now you can see they're starting to look very wilted, not so cared for. Liam may not have been a gardener, but he knew that he could help. So he returned to the railway the very next day and got to work. The flowers nearly drowned, and he had a few pruning problems, but the plants patiently waited while Liam found better ways of gardening. Now, boys and girls, did you notice in this picture? Do you notice how that plant looks like that tree looks like it has a face? And does it look happy right now or not so happy? Kind of maybe the way you look if you have to get a haircut and you don't like it. And here he is. What do you think that means? The notes coming out of his mouth. I think he's singing to his plants. Mrs. O would never do that. I'd probably hurt them. I don't sing very well. As the weeks rolled by, Liam began to feel like a real gardener, and the plants began to feel like a real garden. Our little tree looks much happier now, doesn't it? Most gardens stay in one place, but this was no ordinary garden. With miles of open railway ahead of it, the garden was growing restless. It wanted to explore. The tough little weeds and mosses were the first to move. They popped up farther and farther down the tracks and were closely followed by the more delicate plants. Look at the change already. And over the next few months, Liam and the curious garden explored every corner of the railway. Does anybody know what kind of plants those are? What kind of flowers those are? They're beautiful daisies. And look how the garden's starting to take over. After spending his spring and summer and autumn with the garden, Liam's time on the railway finally was interrupted by winter. Heavy blankets of snow fell on the city that season, and for the first time since he'd become a gardener, Liam could not visit his plants. Rather than waste his winter worrying about the garden, Liam spent it preparing for spring. After 3 cold months, the snow finally began to melt, and Liam rolled his new gardening gear over to the railway. All the things he has in there: rakes, watering cans, shovels, a book on plants and flowers. Winter had taken a toll on the garden. Oh, look, our little tree looks angry again. But thanks to Liam's planning, his new handy tools, and some help from the sun, the plants soon awoke from their winter sleep. The garden had always wanted to explore the rest of the city, and that spring it was finally ready to make its move. Once again, the tough little weeds and mosses set out first. They popped up farther and farther from the railway, and they were followed more closely by the more delicate plants. The garden was especially curious about old, forgotten things. How they're even growing in cracks in the pavement. A few plants popped up where they didn't belong. What do you think's under there? What kind of sign? Oh, and on the fire hydrant too, others mysteriously popped up all at once. Oh, I love how he's doing that. Look, he's like a little ninja gardener, just bringing plants around to different places in the city. But the most surprising things that popped up were the new gardeners. Look at all of them who've been inspired by what Liam has done. And all these other kids that want to join along and help. Oh my goodness. Gardens on the steps, places to picnic, on the piers and docks, and there's some topiaries, and a moose and an elephant and a giraffe. Oh, and look at this. And the tree, the different sections of the tree. And even up on top of that pillar or trestle. Many years later, the entire city had blossomed, but of all the new gardens, Liam's favorite was where it all began. Now, boys and girls, when you look at this picture, where do you think Liam is? Do you think he's this little boy, or do you think this is him, a grown man with his own family now? Liam and his wife and his 2 children. Now, I love that last picture. Let's go back and look at the difference. At the beginning of our story. And what a difference some plants and flowers and shrubs and trees make. Now, if you had to make a guess about a city in the United States, a really big city in the United States, where this story might have taken place, what would your guess be? It could be someplace close to us or someplace very far away. On the very back of the book, there's a note from the author, and it says, "It often seems impossible for nature to thrive in the city of concrete and brick and steel, but the more I've traveled and the closer I've looked at the world around me, the more I've realized that nature is always eagerly exploring the places we've forgotten. You can find flowers and fields and even small forests growing wild in every city. You just have to look for them." On the west side of Manhattan, which is in New York City, it's one of the boroughs of New York City, there's an old elevated railway called the High Line. Its trains rumbled high above the city streets for decades, but in 1980, the High Line was shut down and forgotten. Without people and trains getting in the way, nature was free to redecorate. Over the years, the rusty rails and gravel slowly gave way to wildflowers and trees. And if you look at the railway today, you'll see a lush garden that curves above the streets and between buildings. From the grass bursting through cracks in the sidewalk, or a tuft of goldenrod clinging to a brick wall, or a meadow winding along down an abandoned railway, nature can thrive in the unlikeliest of places. All of this made me curious. What would happen if an entire city decided to truly cooperate with nature? How would that city change, and how would it all begin? So I hope you enjoyed our story today. I'm not going to post an activity to go along with this book, but I will post a picture of the High Line, what it looks like, so you can take a look at it. I hope you enjoyed our story, boys and girls. I'll see you again.